Welcome to the District 5 Delegate Candidates Forum. I'm Charles Harrison, a member of the Community Media Center Board of Directors. We are pleased to bring you this forum tonight and have all 8 candidates with us here this evening. And all 8 candidates are candidates for the Legislative District 5. We're welcoming them to our studio. This program is being broadcast live on channels 19 and HD channel 1086 and streamed on CMC's website at carrollmediacenter.org, where it will be available on demand through Election Day. The forum will be rebroadcast regularly on channel HD 1068 beginning Wednesday, June 29th. The CMC provides this programming as a public service to the community. Our goal is to establish an equal platform for political advocacy and provide local residents with information about individuals running for public office in the upcoming primary election. We encourage citizens to learn more about each candidate and take an active part in the electoral process. At this time, I will turn the program over to our moderator for the evening, Mr. Bob Bluebach, CMC's Managing Editor for Digital Content, to explain the rules and to open tonight's forum.
Thank you, Charles. As moderator this evening, I'll introduce the candidates. Each candidate will have 2 minutes for an opening statement. Those statements will be followed by a question and answer session. This is a very large forum tonight, so we can get as many questions in as possible. We're going to limit candidates to 60 seconds for their answers to each question. Most of the questions were submitted in advance via email, while others will come from tonight's studio audience. All the candidates will answer the same questions. There will be no debate. This is an informational forum. We will go in alphabetical order, and we will rotate who goes first for each question. At the conclusion of the Q&A, each candidate will have 2 minutes for a closing statement. All the responses will be timed, and the timekeeper will give the candidates a signal at the 15-second mark. The timekeeper will ring a bell when time has elapsed, and the moderator may immediately interrupt the candidate and discontinue the statement or answer at that time. Tonight's forum is being shown live on cable television and the internet, recorded for rebroadcast, so we do ask that everyone turn off their cell phones and that attendees refrain from applause or making noise during the forum or doing anything visible or audio to express support or opposition to any candidate during the forum. All right, let us begin then. Each candidate may now present a 2-minute opening statement, and we'll begin with Commissioner Boucher.
Thank you, Mr. Blueball and the Media Center for holding this forum. This is vitally important for the community to understand the candidates. Also want to extend a special thank you to all the citizens out there who voted for me 3.5 years ago and all the citizens throughout the county who supported me during this term. It was a very tough term with the COVID policies, and it was reassuring to have the support of the public. I'm running for the House of Delegates because I wish to take my experience as a Carroll County Commissioner, understanding our budget and its administration, to win back more of our revenue from the state. Carroll County generates a lot of state revenue, but very little of it comes back to us, and it's very difficult for us as a county to balance our budget when we have to finance and help administer the courts, law enforcement, the health department, the library. They're all state agencies, and a lot of revenue we generate gets redistributed to other jurisdictions. I think it's vitally important for our delegation to the General Assembly to fight to bring that revenue back, especially now with the stress of the economy, post-COVID, the dollar's losing its value, families are under a lot of stress, and the last thing they want is to hear that we as government officials need more of your tax dollars. So I want to fight to stop that from happening. My campaign is based upon 3 principles: limited government, personal freedom, and free market economics. And I believe over the last 2.5 years with COVID policies, all 3 of those basic principles that create a thriving community have been under assault, and it's time we have representation to push back. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Next, we'll hear from Commissioner Dennis E. Frazier.
Thank you. Good evening. My name is Dennis Frazier, and I'm a candidate for State Delegate in District 5. I'm currently a county commissioner, and I'm in my 2nd term. Prior to being a commissioner, I was a councilman for the city of Westminster and have been on the Tree Commission, the Parks Board, and the Planning and Zoning Commission, all for the City of Westminster. I retired from teaching a few years ago after 40 years of teaching in both the public and private systems. I have also been a wrestling coach for 45 years, and I'm currently coaching at Gerstel Academy. This follows time spent coaching at Century, South Carroll, Loyola Blakefield, and Towson, as well as various junior league programs. I'm married to Debbie. We have 2 grown children and 1 grandchild. I am the only candidate running for state delegate that has been endorsed by all of these organizations: the Carroll County Education Association, the FOP of Carroll County Lodge 20, Professional Firefighters and Paramedics of Carroll County, the Baltimore Metropolitan Chapter of the AFL-CIO, ASME, and the Sierra Club. I believe these endorsements show that I can work with and have a connection with people that come from a variety of backgrounds, something that is desperately needed today down in Annapolis. I also believe that my work on the MACO, Maryland Association of County Legislative Committee, has helped me prepare for working in Annapolis. The committee goes over many proposed bills and decides how to work with the sponsors. We can oppose a bill, support the bill, or support the bill with amendments, because most bills have something good in them that is beneficial for Maryland, but also have things that are not good. We support a lot of bills with amendments. That way, MACO can work with the bill sponsor to change the bill for the better. As a delegate from Carroll County, I felt that would be my main job in Annapolis, to talk to sponsors of bills and seek changes that would make them more palatable for Carroll County. Thank you.
Thank you. Next up, Mr. Scott Jendrick.
My name is Scott Jendrick, and I'm running for delegate from District 5. I'm not a politician. I own and operate a small business. That business is what got me involved in politics in the first place. In order to help my distillery become more profitable, I needed a law created. I went to Annapolis to testify in the House, where I met my delegate, the same person for my house and the distillery. When I introduced myself to him and told him what I was there for, he turned and ran away from me. That was probably the first spark of an idea of running for delegate. I was shocked my delegate would treat his constituent that way. And in my head, I thought if I was delegate, I would never treat someone I'm supposed to represent that way, even if I disagreed with them. I would listen no matter what. It took 3 years, a 5-gallon bucket of chapstick, and lots of friends to get that single law created. And then COVID hit. During COVID, I retooled my distillery to make hand sanitizer. I provided it to Carroll County, Howard County, Anne Arundel County, and we even actually made it into the White House. We gave it away for free to the public, and that was where that small spark of how to treat people grew. The stories people would tell us, that we were the first place they came after the lockdowns ended, some after months of not even leaving their house. It brings tears to your eyes. I was like a COVID Grinch. My heart grew 3 sizes that pandemic, and I want to feel that way every day. I don't need to be a delegate from District 5. I want to be a delegate for District 5. Thank you.
Thank you. Now, next up, Delegate April Rose.
Thank you. Good evening, everyone. I am Delegate April Rose. I have served in the House of Delegates since 2015, and last session I was appointed to be the Assistant Minority Leader of our caucus. I serve on the Ways and Means Committee, and we deal with education, tax policy, gaming, and election law. In addition, I work as the senior IT recruiter for a small service-disabled veteran-owned defense contractor. I've been with them for over 13 years. I've lived in Carroll County since the early 90s, and I raised my 4 children here. I still reside here, of course, with my husband, Mike, and our youngest is still living with us here and going to school. I'm running for re-election to continue to fight for what I have been fighting for all along: tax relief, 2A rights, and with the recent ruling, we should finally be able to become a shall-issue state. I want to continue to support our law enforcement community, which is desperately needed. We need to stop over-regulation that harms farmers and our small business community. I have fought to promote transparency, and I will always support parents' rights in the classroom. I will continue to promote career and tech education to include the trades, so we can have opportunities for success for all of our children. And I will always stand up for the unborn. I thank everyone for the opportunity here this evening, and I look forward to a great discussion. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, we'll hear from Mrs. Sally B. Taylor.
I'd like to thank the folks here at Carroll County Media Center for organizing this forum, as well as the audience members here and at home, and of course, my fellow candidates. I look forward to this, our only public exchange of ideas and our governing philosophies. A little bit about myself. I've lived over 25 years in Carroll County with my husband, Sam, raising our daughters. I've been both a homeschool mom and a marching band parent. And for a while, I was part of the sandwich generation, caring for both our children and my parents at the same time. Also, I worked many years behind the scenes for public officials, President George H.W. Bush, Congressman Roscoe Bartlett, and Delegate Dan Cox. When I filed to run for the House of Delegates, I did so because I never felt so strongly that our state and our nation is heading down the wrong track, that individual rights and our founding principles are being trampled. Now we can't even get our elected leaders to provide tax relief from the impending gas hike, even though there's a $7 billion budget surplus, which could easily be used to provide Marylanders with a small form of tax relief. I want you to know I will never forget that the power of government comes from the people. Each of us can better make decisions regarding how we spend our money, educate our children, and keep healthy than any government bureaucrat or elected official. Now I want to put my legislative experience, and some of my life experiences too, to serve the people of Carroll County as one of your next delegates. And I would like to ask for your vote in the upcoming Republican primary. Thank you.
Thank you. Next up, Mr. Chris Tomlinson.
Thank you, Bob. It's great to be here tonight, to have this opportunity to share a little bit about myself and earn the support of our voters here. I've been a resident of Carroll County since I was 6 years old, and I've lived in Hampstead and Manchester ever since. My wife, Molly, who I just married 10 days ago, actually, and I own a home in Melrose, just north of Manchester. Professionally, I'm a manager in state procurement for one of the largest state agencies, and before that, I worked in contracts in the private sector. I'm running because Carroll County needs a proven conservative and community leader who is ready to fight for us in Annapolis. For the last decade, I've been working behind the scenes, making sure good Republicans got elected across the state. I've worked closely with our current delegation, helping propose legislation and testifying on legislation. I was elected by Carroll County Republican voters in 2018 to the Carroll County Republican Central Committee. In 2020, I ran a statewide campaign and was elected the third vice chairman of the Maryland Republican Party. And I was the only delegate at the 2020 Republican National Convention elected from Carroll County, where I also received President Trump's campaign's endorsement. From 2017 to 2021, I wrote for the Carroll County Times, where I covered state and local politics as a bi-weekly conservative opinion columnist, fighting for the community, defending conservative values, and using my platform to inspire change and action. But more importantly, I'm running because I believe in community service, and I believe that we have a duty to help our neighbors. In the community, I just completed my term as president of the Lionborough Manchester Lions Club. I serve on the Carroll County Historical Preservation Commission, and I am on the board of the North Carroll Business Alliance. As community leader, I've organized multiple food drives in the Hampstead-Manchester area, ensured the historical properties were preserved, and raised thousands of dollars for college scholarships. I look forward tonight to answering your questions and earning your support and vote on July 19th.
Thank you. Next, we'll hear from Commissioner Stephen A. Wance.
Good evening, everyone. Stephen Wance, and I am a lifelong resident of Carroll, born and raised, and very proud to be able to say that. I've been married to my wife, Kathy, for 43 years. You've got a little bit of time to go there. And we have 2 fantastic daughters and 4 grandchildren. I'm retired from the Baltimore County Fire Department, where I spent 32 years. I'm also a volunteer firefighter here in Carroll. I've been a member of Pleasant Valley Fire Company since 1976, where I served as president, chief, and also as the Emergency Medical Services captain. I'm also the proud drum major of the Westminster Municipal Band, and I've also served on many other organizations, too lengthy to list here. I'm honored as a commissioner to be serving the second term, and I thank the citizens of Carroll for allowing me to do that. And in that term, in both of those terms, I had the ability to be able to be assigned to the Governor's Emergency Management Advisory Council, too many acronyms in the fire service, the Baltimore Metropolitan Council, where I just stepped down as chair, and also on the legislative subcommittee for MACO, and I'm also a 4-year board of director member of MACO. And I bring that up because, as Dennis alluded to previous, my 8 years with MACO have shown me what Annapolis is about, and I know how to be able to affect legislation and ensure that all aspects of local government work for its citizens. One of the things that is important to me, I've seen the lack of knowledge of local government down in Annapolis, and I want to bring that back to that body, and I ask for your support. Thank you.
Thank you. And finally, we'll hear from Dr. Scott Willens.
Thank you to the Media Center, residents of Carroll County, and my fellow candidates. I chose to join the Army after 9/11, and in January, I retired as a lieutenant colonel with 20 years of active duty service and an Iraq deployment. For 18 of those years, I served at Army installations throughout Maryland. I'm a pharmacologist, veterinarian, and animal hospital owner, board certified in public health and preventive medicine. I'm also a husband and father. My enduring love for this nation of opportunity as an iconic force for good in this world now drives me to serve in another capacity as your liaison and voice in Annapolis. And my plan for Carroll County is grounded in what I call the ABCs, or the 3 pillars of agriculture, business, and children. Agriculture is not just integral to the heritage and economy of Carroll, it's critical to the land preservation and conservation initiatives that made us exemplary environmental stewards. We desperately need agriculture and public health experts in Annapolis, in the Assembly, to combat junk science and public interest groups. And as a veterinarian and scientist, I will aggressively support our farmers and promote animal health and welfare. Taxes have increased everywhere for farmers and businesses and for families and retirees, further driving precious human resources out of the state and diminishing our tax base. As a business owner, I will champion growth and prosperity with the same determination that I advocate for my own animal hospital. As a parent concerned about our schools, I'm eager to protect the rights of our youngest and most vulnerable and keep them safe from drugs and violence, bullying and indoctrination, and of course unscientific and unconstitutional mandates. I will staunchly oppose any creep of mandates back into the schools, armed with both the scientific and constitutional foundation to counter emotional, physical, and academic threats to our children, and I will partner with the Board of Ed, commissioners, Farm Bureau, and trade unions to enhance educational opportunities. I'm not an incumbent county official or preordained anointed successor. I have the proven enduring leadership and multidisciplinary experience to represent you in the most comprehensive and professional manner of any candidate. I've fought for America. I will fight for Carroll County. Thank you.
Thank you. Now we'll move on to the question and answer portion of tonight's evening. Remember, you'll have 60 seconds to answer each question, and we're going to start with Commissioner Frazier this time. If elected, what will be your top legislative agenda item for the next session?
Thank you for that question. One of the things I really would like to work on down in Annapolis is that when Annapolis puts mandates on the counties or municipalities that says that we have to do something, and that naturally costs us money, Annapolis should put some skin in the game and come up with about 50% of the money it's going to cost to run that particular program. Some of those programs are great. They'll help. There's no doubt about that. But you can't just put unfunded mandates on counties, expect them to just take the money from somewhere else and then fund that mandate. I feel that if Annapolis has to put at least half the money into the pot for these mandates, they'll think a little harder before passing these. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Jendrick.
The first 2 things I would work on is helping small businesses. I don't think there's a regulation I haven't tripped over or run afoul of in the 5 years that I've been open. Not that I wanted to not do it the right way. It's just very hard to find all the information to do things the right way. The second initiative I would work on is taking some of that $7 billion and fully funding our first responders. I don't believe our Carroll County police or sheriffs have body cameras yet. It's on the budget, but it hasn't been done yet. We should take some of that money and do it now. I think first responders need to be fully funded, all of them, so they can do their job well and get home safe to their own families.
Thank you. Delegate Rose?
Thank you. Going back to the $7.5 estimated billion surplus, I think that we should immediately do something about stopping the gas tax that they put the automatic trigger in. People are paying more at the pump every single day. We had the opportunity to do something about that during this last session. The Democrats stopped us. It's actually unconscionable that we are not able to do something to provide immediate relief on the long term and as we move forward. So that would be one thing that I would want to do. The other thing would be to go back and try to fix and alter the new Paid Family Leave Act that was passed. The Democrats have admitted that there's a lot to it. They said, well, we'll pass it and then we'll figure out how we're going to pay for it. That's wrong, and we should go back and fix that and not put a new payroll tax on every citizen and every business in the state. Thank you.
Thank you. Mrs. Taylor?
There's so many things, but I think the two that really pop out is the spending in Annapolis. I think it's out of hand, and it's something that we need to get a hold of. It affects everything that we do. It affects our taxes, and it binds our citizens up to it, to paying more taxes than they should. The Maryland budget is just out of control. In fact, it is almost twice as much as the state of Georgia, and we only have 6 million people, and the state of Georgia only has 10 million people. So clearly there's something that we're doing wrong. And I also think that we need a truth in permitting, to have permits once they are issued, that the bureaucracies can't go in and cite you on other things they don't like.
Thank you. Mr. Tomlinson?
An issue that I'm most passionate about is putting an end to the opioid fentanyl epidemic. One of the piece of legislation that I think could really make a difference in that was introduced back in 2015 or 2016, and that was the distribution of heroin and fentanyl resulting in death, which was a bill that would have held drug dealers accountable who knowingly had fentanyl in the drug, and then that drug resulted in the death of an individual. The bill was not able to get through the General Assembly, but that's a bill that I would really like to reintroduce and work with my colleagues in both the Republican side and the Democrat side, and I think that's something that both sides could really come to an agreement on, because it affects every community, no matter what party you belong to.
Thank you. Commissioner Wance?
So some of my initiatives also center around finances, of course. One of the biggest things for me that I've watched over the last 8 years is the fact that we have lost a ton of infrastructure money. Highway user revenue money has just disappeared, and they're giving us little bits and pieces back, but that's one of the things that I would work on first, is to increase that for local infrastructure, because our highways are in desperate need of work, and we're doing that pretty much on our own. One of the other things that I would work on, of course, is all things public safety, because I eat, sleep, and drink that. So Chris has some great ideas about that when it comes to the opioids, and certainly our police need to be funded to the highest level, as do our first responders across the board. And finally, defending local autonomy. One size does not fit all in Annapolis, and I believe it's important that we have a voice equal to everyone else.
Thank you. Dr. Willens?
I would probably want to touch with more time on the areas of the ABCs, but most important to me is children. I have 2 stepdaughters and a son, and as others have alluded to, with the opioid crisis, I do have experience working with countermeasures against not only opiates, but other chemical and biological threats at labs throughout Maryland, and that's a priority for me, is their safety, but also setting a little bit different tenor down in Annapolis, especially when we're up against a supermajority of Democrats. I've already had some conversations with some fellow veterinarians about what we can do to try to set an example for balanced and sensible legislation dealing with agriculture, which again brings me to my A, animal health and welfare, public health, balance, not the way it was done in COVID with a disrespect for education, the economy, and mental health. And that would be my major focus in trying to set an example for what we can do for that and also for veterans issues, because the three of us are veterans.
Thank you.
Thanks.
And Commissioner Boucher.
I'd like to thank Mr. Tomlinson for bringing up the opioid issue. He is a friend of mine and knows the pain I felt with the loss of my daughter 5 years ago. It's touching everyone. It doesn't matter what background you have, it's affected all of us. Over the last several years, we've seen more fentanyl coming across the southern border, and it's destroying our society. I'm a firm believer in treatment, not necessarily incarceration, but sometimes incarceration is necessary. I believe that with the Supreme Court rulings, we're going to need a voice down in Annapolis to debate over some of the regulations concerning the realignment of the right to bear arms and the abortion issue. As a Catholic and a life member of the NRA, I'm very passionate about these subjects. And I'd also like to agree with my colleagues on the need for more finance coming back to our county. We suffer under mandates with no money, and both Commissioner Frazier and Wance nailed that. Thank you.
Thank you. And we're going to touch on a lot of those issues that have been brought up as we go on tonight, so thank you. This time we're going to start with Mr. Jendrick. Inflation is hitting Marylanders hard. The price of fuel in particular is a significant hardship. How do you recommend the Maryland legislature respond?
I think the fuel tax holiday that April mentioned was a great start. And I believe that's probably the only thing we could do at the state level to relieve the price at the pump. Maryland isn't a gasoline-producing state, so I think that one's probably the only thing we could do that I'm aware of.
Thank you. Delegate Rose?
Thank you. And yes, during this past session, as we saw this happening, of course, it was blamed on the war in Ukraine. It certainly was far beyond that because decisions were made to stop pipelines that happened at the federal level far before that happened. We not only did the initial gas tax holiday, in my committee, we actually had the hearing and we pushed for longer than 30 days, knowing that we would be out of session, so there would be no opportunity without a special session to go beyond that, and no one knew when this war would stop. So we had bills on the Republican side that I co-sponsored and supported that would stop the automatic gas tax increases, and that's about to happen coming up here at the end of this week on July 1st. So that's one thing we could do at the state level, and certainly we need to lobby our federal officials to open up the pipelines and doing everything that we can to be energy self-sufficient in this country, which we are certainly able to do.
Thank you. Mrs. Taylor?
You know, I think that Republicans should use all the tools in their tool chest. And as far as a special session is concerned, I believe that our governor can call a special session and he can get the delegates and the state senators together to accomplish and put on the table the fuel tax. And I know that we'll open up other bills that possibly could be raised. But what that would also do would be put every Democrat on record saying that they do not want to support the relief to the Marylanders. So I think that maybe we should call our governor to call the special session and let's get her done.
Thank you. Mr. Tomlinson?
Like Delegate Rose said, Governor Hogan and the Republicans, they obviously pushed really hard to get more tax relief. A little bit of tax relief was brought in this past session, but there could have been more, especially with a $2.5 billion surplus. It's kind of embarrassing that the Democrats weren't able to agree to more tax relief or to the gas holiday. I've been thinking about this a lot lately, and I would imagine that as we see gas prices continue to go up, Democrat legislators are going to be hearing the same thing that Republican legislators are hearing, and not just from individuals, but from also businesses and from government. when we get to a point where your local county government, and we're not there yet, at least I don't think so, but when we get to a point where county governments aren't able to fill up the tank for snow plowing trucks or for road crews, I think that's when Democrat legislators are going to probably be hearing it and change their minds.
Thank you. Commissioner Wance?
So certainly I agree with most of what everyone has said when it comes to the gas tax relief. I'd also like to get to the bottom of it. I think there should be a push to really delve into why the gas prices are as high as they are. You know, Delegate Rose alluded to the blame game that was being played. And we've all heard, you know, this one getting blamed and that one, well, it's the war, it's this, it's that. I know a local gas company here in the state is going to be providing relief over the July 4th holiday. I just heard it. So if they can do that without a whole lot of sacrifice, why can't everyone else? So I'd really like to dive into who is responsible for it. And certainly if we have to revisit that tax credit or that gas tax credit, that's something we should also do.
Thank you. Dr. Willens?
The gas tax relief, or uncoupling it from the rising cost of the fuel itself as a percentage of that would be helpful. But I think also overall, as I alluded to earlier, we're kind of driving out a lot of our tax base by raising property taxes, not having a business-friendly state to begin with, retirement taxes. I mean, I chose to live here. This is where I make my retirement stand, but any neighboring state would be much more friendly to my military retirement as it is to even active duty folks who tend to live over the state line. And I think we lose a lot more in that overall number being penny wise and pound foolish about tax assessment. And we could cultivate a lot more of that by maintaining not only the folks who have that capital and resources, but also their subject matter expertise within the state.
Thank you. Commissioner Boucher?
Well, inflation has been caused by our federal government's monetary policy during COVID, and there's not much we at a local level can do until our federal government gets our monetary policy straight. We'd all be faced with continual inflation. The more money you print, the less the dollar's worth, and energy is traded internationally on the dollar, so that's what's causing the inflation. It has nothing to do with greed of the oil industry. But the only thing we can do at the state level is retract our spending back. We have to look at the government just like we look at all of our budgets. When things are costing more, you have to cut back on what you buy. The same premise needs to apply to our government. Whether it's the state or the federal government, we need to retract back our spending. But unfortunately, politicians get elected by spending money. So it'll be a real tough battle as a Republican down in Annapolis, but I'm willing to fight that battle. But there's really not much we can do to stop inflation. That's a responsibility at the federal level.
Thank you. And Commissioner Frazier?
Thank you. I agree with what everyone has already said about a fuel tax holiday for Maryland. I also think that if the federal government, and they're talking about a fuel tax holiday across the nation right now, if they pass that, then we need to have a special session down in Annapolis so we can couple our fuel tax holiday with the federal government's. So you're looking at a lot of savings on a gallon of gas. I also think, as was already alluded to, this Friday, there's a 7-cent automatic tax increase on gasoline coming into effect. I'm not down in Annapolis right now, but I think that should be stopped right now. It's the wrong time to do something like that. Put it off, I don't know, till when, after the war in Ukraine's over, or something when the inflation has settled down, before we look at increasing our taxes by 7 cents on gasoline. Thank you.
Thank you. The next question was clearly, there's no question what the biggest topic on the minds of Carroll Countyans, as well as probably everyone across the nation. We got the most feedback about this type of issue from both the audience members and from people who emailed us ahead of time. So this time we're going to start with Delegate Rose. And in light of the Supreme Court overturning Roe v. Wade, should the legislature revisit any aspect of Maryland's present laws regarding abortion, and would you support efforts to include that right in Maryland's Constitution?
Well, first of all, I am very happy with the Roe versus Wade decision. I think that should never have gone to the federal level, and I think it should be to the states, and I think that makes a lot of sense, and I'm happy to see that happen. I am very pro-life. I am adopted myself, and so I take this issue very seriously, and I always have. I absolutely do not support, did not support, and will not support enshrining abortion into the Constitution of the state of Maryland. Maryland is going to continue to be one of the, I think we're the 4th easiest state to obtain an abortion. We learned that over this past session. I think that we should be putting money and effort into supporting mothers who need the support to hopefully bring their babies to term, help them with adoption, help them with medical care, and certainly for mothers who are having high-risk pregnancies. If we're going to invest any money from the state of Maryland, we should be using it to save babies' lives and not end them. Thank you.
Thank you. Mrs. Taylor?
Well, I certainly agree with Delegate Rose in so many ways on this particular issue. It was a great celebration last week. It was 50 years, time to turn these decisions back to the state so that communities can decide for themselves how they want to govern on this particular issue. Here in Maryland, we have the most extreme abortion laws on the books. It's any time, at any point in pregnancy, and I believe that most Marylanders would want to roll some of those. They're not restrictions; they're some of those things back. And then maybe this is a time that we can revisit and have a real discussion about how we protect life here in Maryland.
Thank you. Mr. Tomlinson?
I also support the Supreme Court's decision, and I am definitely opposed to amending Maryland's Constitution. Like Sally just said, Maryland has some of the is probably one of the worst states when it comes to the pro-life movement. I've always been pro-life as a Catholic. I've been a supporter of several great pro-life organizations, such as the Carroll County Pregnancy Support Center right down the road, and Vans for Life. It's a really great national organization. I'm also endorsed by Maryland's Right to Life organization, and I will be a staunch defender of the unborn if elected.
Thank you. Commissioner Wance?
So I agree with everybody so far. We should not be legislating from the bench. That should be left up to the local electeds where the responsibility lies. So I agree with that decision because, again, so much is being legislated from the bench these days that it's mind-boggling. Personally, I'm pro-life and always have been. I also, as an elected, know that you need to represent everyone, and I have heard the stories of when it comes to those that have issues when it comes to criminal activity, rape or incest, and those rare conditions that occur. So I think we have to be mindful of that. We have to be mindful of the personal decision that people make. But I am pro-life, and I do support the fact that we are not legislating that from the bench.
Thank you. Dr. Willens?
I probably agree a bit more with Commissioner Wance on it. The Supreme Court's purview, their role is to determine if legislation is legitimate relative to the Constitution. And the purpose of the Constitution is to provide the blueprint for how government works, not individual laws. So Roe was never properly legislated, and that's why it was flawed and failed. And I agree with the Supreme Court's decision. I also agree it should be left up to the states. As to my personal viewpoint, similar to Commissioner Wance, I believe there are extenuating circumstances for the health of the mother, as well as criminal activity. And I think we need to start to look at this, as well as certain other issues, as the 80% solution, because you have the polar opposites throwing Hail Mary passes to the end zones, and the rest of us where we live and believe and what we espouse to are benched on the sidelines, not able to decide. So I think it's a state's decision. I'm pro-life, but I understand there are circumstances where medically that should be decided, and medical is a state's issue.
Thank you. Commissioner Boucher?
Well, I think it's poignant to say that if abortion was legal in the 1960s, Delegate Rose would not be sitting here with us today. And let that sink in on you. As a Catholic, I'm personally against abortion, but I do believe the greatness in our nation is compromise. There's no overwhelming majority of citizens in this state that support abortion on up to the point of birth, and there's no overwhelming support in this state for completely outlawing abortion. And I think that debate needs to take place on the floor of the General Assembly to figure out where the compromise is on this. And it's important to point out, too, there's only 2 other nations that have abortion as we do, and that's Communist China and North Korea. Thank you.
Thank you. Commissioner Frazier?
Thank you. I have to start off by saying that I do believe in God, and I believe God made us. When God made people, he gave us a free will. I don't think that was a mistake. If God gave us a free will, that means we have the right to choose what we think is best for us. I'm not intelligent enough to go against something that is, I believe, handed down by God. Therefore, I would not legislate one way or the other on this. I think people should have the right to choose on their own. I also believe that when you make these particular choices, you have to keep in mind the consequences of the choices, and those consequences you have to live with for the rest of your life. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Jendrick?
I was pleasantly surprised to see the government actually follow the Constitution with the 10th Amendment, where this should be a state's issue, not legislated from the court. Your other part of the question was, should it be enshrined in Maryland's Constitution?
Correct.
That's a hell no. I think we need to chew at this from the outside to get it back from the most, the 3rd easiest state, I think I heard, 4th. We need to chew at this from anytime, anywhere rule, because that is, I'm sorry, if you're getting an abortion at 8.5 months, that's a fully formed fetus that can live outside the body. That's murder. We need to chew at that and get it down to a reasonable level, and not that there is a true reasonable level for murder, but there's, I see my hand being waved, so. No, it shouldn't be enshrined in the Constitution of Maryland, but being a blue state, it's gonna be hard to chew at it, but we need to try.
Thank you. Next question, we'll start with Mrs. Taylor. As many Carroll County residents live here because of the rural agricultural roots and feel of the community, what will you do to keep Carroll from becoming overdeveloped and turning into Howard County 2.0?
Well, people want to live in Carroll County because of what you just said. I was knocking on a door with a lady who just had moved up from Howard County, and she was very, very, very concerned about the growth issues. And I think there's 2 things that perhaps we can do in Carroll County, and that has more to do with our county zoning, as to stick with the zoning. So when people buy a house and there is a farm and it's been zoned a farm, it should stay a farm. Shouldn't become a solar field either. So I think that's one thing that we can do. And the second thing that to keep our maybe our growth down is to concentrate more on business and getting more industry and those type things, so we have more jobs and less reason for people to build houses here.
Thank you. Mr. Tomlinson?
So one of the really great things that our county has done over multiple generations, not to pat your back or anything, but our several different generations of Board of Commissioners have done a really good job of making sure that our agriculture preservation program has been a great success, one of the actually best in the nation. Right now, they've preserved, the county has preserved over 75,000 acres. And that has really ensured that we do not become Howard County. Personally, I share a property line with 18,000 acre farm, Panora Acres, and right before my wife and I bought that property, that was one of the first things we did, was look at whether that farm was in the program, and it is in the program. And I think Carroll County just needs to continue doing that, and as a delegate, I'll fight to make sure we can provide funding on the state level for that.
Thank you. Commissioner Wance?
Thank you. Near and dear to my heart. We are at 78,000 plus. Every year that I've done a budget, and I've done 8 of them now, ag preservation has been attacked. There have been commissioners that have wanted to take money out of the program. I have been a staunch supporter. I have never stepped down from that, and in fact, we've increased it over a couple of those years. So I think it's very important. I also am the ex officio and have served on the planning and zoning for 4 out of my 8 years, and I can tell you that our zoning laws and rules are effective, and I don't see us even remotely becoming any part of Howard 2.0. As a state legislator, I'll change hats and say, yes, because we are one of the lead counties in the nation, funding should be increased to ensure that our 100,000 goal is reached.
Thank you. Dr. Willens?
Well, I'm not originally from Carroll County, I'll put that out there, but this is where I've chosen to be. I've spent a great deal of time living in Minnesota through veterinary school and North Carolina for grad school, and working with farmers and understanding their constraints and needs, as well as animal health, herd health, and public health. And I think that, the preservation is critical. It's critical to the heritage and what people of Carroll County want to have in their future and to pass down to their children. I will say that I've worked with some folks with the Farms Not Panels group, and they've been concerned about the unanimous decision recently for the commissioners to allow some solar farms to come in on ag pres land and bypass certain zoning things, and they felt like they haven't been listened to by the Council of Commissioners.
Thank you. Commissioner Boucher?
Carroll County has a plan to address this, and that is the ag program, which has been mentioned, and we're very aggressive on that. The other side of that equation is the designated growth areas. And the real irony of this, too, is a lot of people that move into Carroll County, they move into the designated growth areas where there's municipal water and sewer, and then they complain they're not in the countryside. And I always try to tell people, if you move to Carroll County and you want to be in the countryside, go move to the country. Don't move into a city where there's municipal water and sewer and then complain there's growth there. We need the growth in the growth areas to address the population. And unless we stop people from breeding and reproducing, we do absolutely need to have housing. If anyone out there has young children or young adults in their family, where do you want them to live? What's happening is we're forcing our children to move out of our county to other jurisdictions. So it is important for us to address the growth by focusing it where we have municipal water and sewer. Thank you.
Thank you. Commissioner Frazier?
Thank you. I guess if we're Howard County 2.0, that makes us twice as good or something. But anyway, I support the Ag Pres program. I always have. I would like, as a state delegate, to put consistent funding into the Ag Pres programs that the state provides. Since I've been a county commissioner, that funding has gone up and down, up and down. We can't depend on that. Something that we need to look at and need to depend on if we want to reach 100,000 acres. I also say that we need a balance between ag pres and growth. We need both. If you don't have growth, the county dies, but we're trying for that 100,000 acres. We're pretty close right now. Still like to move forward with that. And I'll additionally add that I'm the commissioner for this budget cycle that suggested additional $1 million of one-time money to go on ag pres, and it was voted on and passed. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Jendrick?
I agree with everybody about the ag preservation program. I also agree with Eric Boucher about the water and sewer. That's one limiting factor for our part of the county. The last thing to make sure we don't become Howard 2.0 is we need to elect conservative Republicans, which Howard has not done and started to not do consistently. So elect conservative Republicans, and there's 8 of us sitting on this stage. Well, maybe 7.5, but.
Thank you. Delegate Rose?
Thank you. This is an issue that is very near and dear to my heart, and it's something that I started working on as soon as I was appointed to the House of Delegates. It all goes back to property rights, and it all goes back to what we are allowed to do as locals. I put in legislation during the O'Malley years. They instituted what is called the tiers legislation, which greatly reduces the ability to develop properties throughout the entire state because of well and septic and because of the hatred of well and septic. And so therefore, we've had to come up with growth areas which shoves all of the growth into certain parts of the county. And those parts are seeing a lot of that, and it's a problem. If we open up the property rights throughout the county and allow the locals, allow our local planning and zoning to make the determination where growth should happen, then we would have housing opportunities, we would preserve the rights of farmers and their farmland. When you tell them they are no longer allowed to have a certain amount of lots on their property, whether or not they want to develop it, you're taking away the value of their land, and that is wrong.
Thank you. Next question for Mr. Tomlinson. What can be done at the legislative level to improve Carroll County schools, and what sort of impact do you see Kerwin making?
So Kerwin I've been opposed to Kerwin since started talking about it years ago, and I'm still against it. They passed it this past session without any plan on how to pay for it, and at some point, someone's going to have to pay for it as we start to see Kerwin implemented in our schools. As far as what can we do at the state level, I think our Carroll County School Board has been absolutely fantastic in every way. Unfortunately, as we saw during the pandemic and as we've seen recently with the health curriculum or the family life curriculum, when the state school board wants to step on our heads, they can. They can basically override anything that we try to do. So as a delegate, one of the things I want to do is try to work and change possibly some of our curriculum at the state level, because unfortunately our school board, as good as they are, sometimes their hands are tied.
Thank you. Commissioner Wance?
So for me, it comes down to one word, and that's accountability. I recently sat in on a presentation by the Blueprint for Education Accountability Board that was put together to, in layman's terms, sort of babysit the Kerwin, which has been changed to Blueprint for Education now. They made it sound fancier. But there's always been a huge lack of accountability. We throw money at education, which certainly is incredibly important, but in a lot of jurisdictions, they have no idea where that money went. It gets thrown in, and it's somewhere, and when someone tries to find out or follow the money, they rapidly lose their place. So for me, it's about accountability. I think as a state delegate, we're going to really have to support this accountability board and make sure that we know where every penny and every dollar is going to education.
Thank you. Dr. Willens?
Agreed, and with 50% of our budget or more going towards education and not much of our taxes, as Commissioner Boucher has alluded to, coming back to us, we need to get more of that budget. I'd like to see more at a state level, some life skills back into the classroom, kind of like when we were coming up and you had home ec and shop, so more opportunities for trades, and I've spoken with the plumbers and steam fitters about that, and opportunities for high school and middle school students, as well as agriculture, certainly on the county level. And that's the problem with Kerwin, is that it's cookie cutter, and it tries to apply everything that they feel is great cross-leveled in the state to us. And having been raised by two teachers myself, and seeing a lot of their disenchantment about throwing money at problems where there's plenty of money, it's really other resources, and often it's fraud, waste, and abuse, or just not having the student's best interests at heart. Lately, it's been not involving or being concerned about parents' rights and issues too.
Thank you. Commissioner Boucher?
Commissioner Frazier mentioned earlier unfunded mandates and the stress it puts upon our county budget, and he is absolutely right. This is the biggest one that will come down the pipeline, and it's not going to come with the revenue we need. Unfortunately, so much of our tax revenue gets redistributed to other jurisdictions, so this is going to hurt us. As a delegate, I'd have to fight to try to bring more money back and justify the argument that they're actually hurting us. We are actually penalized for being a conservative, successful Republican county, which I find quite absurd. Also, with the students in the school, we have a big mental health issue after the COVID policies, and I don't think this mandate's will do anything to address the needs of our children that are suffering from the mental health issues which they've received by being shut out of school en masse. Thank you.
Thank you. Commissioner Frazier?
First, I'd like to say actually my first answer to the question was, the state should have to come up at least 50% of the money it requires to run this. If they do that, I'm much happier than I am right now, because we need help with this. We're one of the counties that's really ahead of maintenance of effort, but we're looking down the road, it's still going to be a problem. I also do not want to have, let's say, Carroll County chip in money so other counties can pay for their what they need to do for the blueprint. I don't think that's right. I think the Carroll County money for our taxpayers should stay in Carroll County. I work for that as a state delegate, so our money stays in Carroll. We fund our school system and so forth. If you look at what some of the school systems are going to have to come up with, it's tens of millions of dollars more than they're doing right now. Where are they going to come up with that? Hopefully they're not coming to us. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Jendrick?
Sure. Excuse me. I believe it all has to come down to accountability. Excuse me, water went down the wrong pipe. For not only this money, but also the COVID money that the schools got and the school boards got, or the associations got, sorry. We need to be able to track it and make sure when it's spent, it needs to be spent wisely. So it's all about accountability, and right now it's lacking. There is none.
Thank you. Delegate Rose?
Thank you. So serving on Ways and Means on the Education Subcommittee, we discussed this for several years in a row. All along, I have said that the Kerwin bill, it was far too encompassing. There are a lot of things that you could like in that, in particular, the career and workforce readiness. We could have done a lot to address that over the years. I put in legislation repeatedly to address getting more career and tech education, the trades, and that's always pushed back by the union. Truthfully, what we really need to do is to let the locals decide how they want to address some of these things, give us more flexibility, allow these key things that will allow our kids to be successful become graduation requirements. So I don't support it, and we went through this when they imposed kindergarten, mandatory all-day kindergarten. We had a big budget issue, and we're going to have the same problem with the implementation of Kerwin.
Thank you. Mrs. Taylor?
I've been against Kerwin since it was Thornton. I think that we have a lot of people across the state, and here's something that Republicans and a lot of Democrats can unite on. It's school choice. If you look at what's going through in Baltimore City right now, there's a big movement with the folks on the ground because they are tired of their failing school system, and they see that this $3.9 billion a year for the next 10 years is not going to help their kids. And the folks here in Carroll County, and the folks out in Garrett County, and the folks down in Montgomery County, well, you know what? I think we all can come together and tell our delegates and state senators that we need some real choice, and that also money can follow the child, and the robust charter system that we have in Baltimore City that can also be implemented across, and we can make different changes. I'm sorry.
Thank you. Okay, starting with Commissioner Wantz. How do you feel elected officials did with instituting COVID-19 policies over the past 2 years?
So that's an all-over-the-map question. I trusted the experts as an elected official, and that's how I decided to go down my path. And as a first responder, and my wife is a registered nurse, we listened to the physicians and the doctors, and that's how I, as an elected, handled it. How do I feel how the rest of them or how everyone handled it? Again, that's subject for debate, and in a minute, I don't know that I can answer that. I know that there were a lot of strong feelings one way or the other. I do believe that we came through this in the best way that we could have. I'm proud of our county citizens for the way in which they engaged, and I'm going to have to leave it at that because it's a longer debate than a minute.
Thank you. Dr. Willens?
in my mind, there's not too much debate. We were lied to by Fauci and other deep state operatives who wanted to use this as an opportunity to control us, to control the 2020 election, and intrude in our lives and force unscientific and unconstitutional mandates. I worked at infectious diseases for several years, as did Scott Jendrick, and I've also worked at Walter Reed Institute of Research on COVID. I volunteered for a clinical trial vaccine by Inovio because I believed in supporting the science and promoting it, protecting my family and my country, and I would do it again. The consequences to that for me was a complete shoulder replacement back in September. And I got J&J just so the Army would leave me alone. And I had COVID twice already anyway, once a little over a month ago. So the science doesn't follow, and I'm the one with the science to go toe-to-toe and lock horns with these charlatans and throw them.
Thank you. Commissioner Boucher.
Well, this is a big issue for me because I had fought against my colleagues 4-1 on a lot of this, and I very much appreciate the comments by Commissioner Wayne. That was very big of him that say what he said. I allude to the mental health of our children. We have damaged our children severely. Having done a tour of the school system, I've seen the damage that's been done to our children, not only with their mental health, but falling 2 years behind in school. The policies that were put in place have led to the inflation we presently have, which is wrecking all of our budgets. I predict that we'd have an increase in overdoses, overdose deaths, suicide and alcoholism, and mental health issues. They have shot up across the board. And it's important for us to address and recognize where we went wrong and provide the resources that help those people out, because we're seeing mental health issues in elementary school children that have never, ever been seen before. And Lord help us if we don't get on top of that by the time they become young adults or into high school. Thank you.
Thank you. Commissioner Frazier.
Thank you. This is a novel virus. We haven't had this before. We haven't had this type of epidemic before. So what we at the county did, we followed what the state said, because we believed that they had more experts online and they were more abreast of what was going on. The guidelines changed as hopefully we learned more of what was happening and how it could be spread and so forth. And I think that the state erred on the side of caution. I don't necessarily think that's a bad thing when you talk about a pandemic and you're talking about millions of lives that have been lost. But I also want to say, I hope we've learned from this pandemic. The mistakes we made, let's look at them. Let's not make those same mistakes again. This hopefully will be the only one that I live through in my lifetime, but it won't be most likely the only one that ever happens. Learn from these mistakes, move forward. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Jendrick.
I think it was handled like a pathetic joke that the virus didn't transmit below 4 feet. We had to wear a mask standing up, but in a business you could sit down and take your mask off. The science was not followed. And as Dr. Willens said, Fauci and his scientists didn't follow the science. And his scientists also got money from Fauci. It's amazing if you start tracking the money, how many grants those scientists that agreed with him got. And the scientists that disagreed with him quickly saw that and then agreed with him and got funding. But to say we did this the right way, no. We destroyed our economy for no reason. We destroyed our kids' mental health for no reason. When it didn't transmit effectively for healthy kids to keep them masked up for as long as we did, even in Carroll County, it's a travesty. And it's wrong.
Thank you. Delegate Rose.
I think the complete lack of common sense in handling this pandemic is still to this day mind-boggling. I think that we shut things down and didn't look at our local numbers. We weren't given the control that I think we should have had. I think that's wrong. I spent so many hours on the phone with business owners, scared to death that the local health officer who was given unbelievable control to unilaterally go in and shut down any business that they wanted to, that was also wrong. There was no appeal process. It was completely to the whim of whoever walked in. I talked to businesses that were told one thing on a Friday, something different on a Saturday, something different on a Monday. And you talk about following the science, the CDC itself would say one thing on a Friday and completely contradict themselves on the following Monday. Yet we're all supposed to listen, stay in our homes, ruin our kids' lives, not let them play sports, even though we were told it was safe to go outside, but then we said, no, you can't, you can go outside, but then you have to wear a mask. None of it made sense. It's going to take years to recover from it, and we still are.
Amen.
Thank you. Mrs. Taylor.
We should never lock down the healthy. We should never disobey or go against our Constitution, our state Constitution, our U.S. Constitution, and we should always trust in the American people, the folks of Carroll County. They know, we know what would be right for our families. If there was a pernicious disease, do you think people would be going out and about? No. But our government let us down. They didn't have confidence that we, the people, knew how to get through. We also knew that we should be looking at our elderly and protecting our elderly, and we knew that early on. And we didn't do that here in this state until these task force came in May, and they knew these things back in January. So this is more than frustrating, and it's more than just, I'm out of time.
Thank you. Mr. Tomlinson.
One thing that I don't think's been mentioned yet is down in the General Assembly, where we're all hoping to get down to. As of when session wrapped up on the House side, they were still wearing masks, correct? So while if you think things are ridiculous, go down to Annapolis. They still are acting as if this is April 2020 down on the House side. The one branch of government I will say that I thought handled things very well and deserves kudos was, like I said earlier, local school board. Those guys who I've been proud to support all along, they were the first in the state to get our kids back in the classroom. They fought the state school board on getting masks off, and I don't think if they had fought like they did and led that effort, I don't think the masks would have came off yet. And then they also got kids back on the field playing sports, so
Thank you. Okay, we'll start with Dr. Willens on this one. So do you believe Maryland businesses are losing significant numbers of people, resources, and tax base to neighboring states? And if so, what can be done about it?
That seems kind of softball, so I answered it. I think if, like I said, if we're not penny wise and pound foolish, that we'll get more people to stay. We'll be more inviting. Look at all the folks who leave from New York to go to Florida, or as I said, don't Californicate my taxes. I mean, if people want to move to Maryland, for example, then that's great, or move to Carroll, then it should be because the values that they have align with the county, not other. Don't try to make where you are where you were. And I think we're losing a lot of the good folks with the resources, with the subject matter expertise to surrounding states. It's particularly an issue for active duty military, which we have quite a bit of, many bases in the state. Of all the branches, and we also lose a lot of our retirees as well.
Thank you. Commissioner Boucher.
Well, the data I've seen shows that people are fleeing the state of Maryland to more conservative states such as Tennessee, South Carolina, and Florida, and there's good reason. They happen to be pro-family states with lower tax rates, and they're anti-crime. One of the things that really hurts this state is the coddling of the criminal element in our cities and other jurisdictions, and they're starting to flow across their border into Carroll County. So I really don't blame anyone from wanting to flee this state, especially when they're retiring. So we need to have Republicans down in General Assembly that understand the principles of economics and are anti-crime and pro-Second Amendment to help defend the people to stay here.
Thank you. Commissioner Frazier.
Yeah, I also agree people are leaving the state for a lot of various reasons, and we need to do what we can to try to keep those people here, especially people that have been here for decades, paid their taxes, worked in the county or the state, And then we don't want those people to leave. They've helped build this state. We want them to stay here. So we should do what we have to do to keep them here in this state. One that was already mentioned is that when people retire, they can go to surrounding states and actually be better off because of the tax situation, something that we have to look at so those people can stay here in the state of Maryland, work in the state of Maryland. And I have to say, if you look in Carroll County, we have one of the safest counties around, so I don't think crime is driving people out of Carroll County, so it's other things. But we have to do what we can to try to keep people in this state. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Jendrick.
The short answer to your question is yes. Even I don't intend on retiring in Maryland because of the issues with taxing retirement. I think once I'm delegate, I'll work on changing those laws, so maybe I will retire here in Maryland.
Okay, thank you. Delegate Rose.
Thank you. I would like more than a minute, but I'll try to keep it brief. So as far as the business community, one thing that I mentioned, here's yet another thing. We passed mandatory increase in the minimum wage with no way of giving flexibility. We are a small geographic state. It is very easy for a business to say, I am tired of you harassing me. I'm going to headquarters somewhere else. They could still hire people that live here, but you know, the rules that you keep putting on them is difficult. I mentioned we have this new paid family leave. It sort of mirrors FMLA. There is going to be a new payroll tax on every single worker and every single business. How much will it be, do you ask? They don't know. They're going to study it after they passed it. Businesses have had it. It's even the smallest businesses. It's businesses under 15 employees. 15 employees is usually you do this for larger businesses or 50 or above. This is the smallest of our businesses. We've suffered, we've just talked about COVID, over 2 years. They're hanging on, and now you're going to pass another tax on them.
Thank you. Mrs. Taylor.
Ditto. And we've had this climate in the state for decades that we continually tax and put more regulations on our prosperous folks, and then we have no accountability on how money is being spent, and people, my own family members are fleeing. I have more family members, God bless them, in the grave than I do now walking around. But after a while, it's very frustrating to see the numbers of people that are just leaving the state because of the retirement tax, and the retirement tax that was just passed was a joke. I mean, that was just appalling that they even took a victory lap for that one. So I'm going to get the bell again.
Thank you. Mr. Tomlinson.
One of the things that hasn't been mentioned yet is down in the General Assembly, they are, actively a lot of legislation's been hit on that they passed that hurts businesses. The one that hasn't been mentioned yet was different in what they consider environmentally friendly bills, such as banning Styrofoam. Out in Hampstead, where I'm from, we used to have the Dart Container Company who made Solo Cup. They were in a 1 million square foot warehouse. After that Styrofoam bill got passed, they packed up, they moved to Delaware. And I'm sure there's plenty of other examples. On the local level, we had the city of Westminster pass a plastic bag ban. If you go shop in Westminster, you'll be surprised at the grocery store to not see a plastic bag. All of this kind of legislation, whether it's at the local level or at the state level, it's hurting businesses, and we need to push back against this because it's killing us.
Thank you. And Commissioner Wance.
I think it's all already been said. The question was about businesses, though, specifically. So let me touch on that real quick. I think in Carroll, maybe we're on an island here, but we have the lowest unemployment rate in the state right now. We're at 3.1%, which is phenomenal. So something's working here, and I don't know where those folks are working, but I know a lot of them are working here. So I applaud our business owners here in Carroll for the things that they're accomplishing. We've seen an uptick in new businesses, which is great. The airport facility out on Route 97, we've gotten 2 new big corporations out there. Penguin Random House just moved here. Most of all of their operation is now here. So we're seeing some really good positive stuff when it comes to economic growth and development here. As far as folks leaving the state for retirement, there's no question about that. I can't argue with that. They are. But I think here in Carroll, with that low unemployment rate, I need to applaud our business owners here. They're doing something right.
Thank you. This was touched on earlier by a couple of you, and we'll start with Commissioner Boucher. What specific legislation would you propose to address the opioid epidemic? And how would you work to get it passed?
Well, that's a tough one. I don't know whether you can truly solve it with legislation. It demands resources to address the problem. It's the treatment that people need to address it, because I have friends that were never addicts before, and they go in for back surgery and they take an Oxycontin, and next thing you know, they're an addict. So we need a lot of awareness, for one, and we need less doctors prescribe the opiates. And another thing that's way out of our control that our legislation locally wouldn't address is the amount of fentanyl coming over our southern border. Until we stop the flow of fentanyl coming over our southern border, no amount of legislation the General Assembly could pass could help it. But it's important for all of us as individuals, one by one, to recognize that there's an addiction problem out there and show love and support to your loved ones that suffer from addiction. I don't think the solution to this problem is legislative. It's going to take all of us collectively and the federal government stopping the Chinese government from manufacturing and bringing fentanyl into our nation.
Thank you. Commissioner Frazier.
I think one thing we need to legislate is longer rehab. When people go into rehab, the longest time you can be in there is 28 days. It simply is not enough. And depends on your insurance company, you could be in there for as little as 7 days. What kind of rehab do you get done in 7 days? And then when you get out of rehab, you go back to the areas where you were taking the drugs in the first place, and your support system, the scaffolding that you need to stay off the drugs, doesn't always come into effect the day you get back. So if you get back on Tuesday, you might say, see me on Friday. Okay, you got that time in between to slip back the way it was. So longer rehab for people that are taking the drugs. They need help. We also need more psychiatrists. Most people that are taking drugs is self-medicate. It's a dual diagnosis. They're taking the drugs because they don't feel mentally well for themselves, and the drugs make them feel a little bit better. More psychiatrists, longer rehab, and my time's up. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Jendrick.
I agree with the two gentlemen to my right. Exactly. Thank you very much. Mostly, I would say I leaned more toward exactly what Boucher was talking about. We're trying to bail the boat without fixing the holes, and that only leads to a sunken boat. I think we need to fix the holes first, then start bailing, and if part of that bailing is legislation, we can figure it out then. But the first thing that needs to happen is we need to stop the supply.
Thank you. Delegate Rose.
Thank you. I agree with the fentanyl that's coming over, and I think that we need to hold these criminal drug dealers accountable if we can trace it back to who is giving out this fentanyl, and hold them accountable, stop coddling criminals, and put them in jail. We've done a lot in Annapolis. We have dealt with, and it's going to take many years to dig out of the hole that we dug into, because for many, many years, doctors were routinely giving 30 days, 15 days supply of these opioid-based painkillers. And so that has been addressed. I think that I have heard testimony in Annapolis that it could take no less than 3 days to become addicted. And so that's something that we have been addressing. I think that it's going to take a while to get back out of it. I think that looking at things like medical marijuana as an alternative for some of these painkillers is something that we've also passed and looked at. Certainly it needs to be regulated and watched and not abused. That's a lot to talk. That's a big issue for a minute.
Sure.
Thank you.
Thank you. Mrs. Taylor.
I believe there's some lawsuits that Maryland is in the process of getting large amounts of money. Johnson & Johnson, I forget the other suits. They were both national and international, but Maryland is getting sizable chunks, similar to what happened with the cigarette tax. Thanks. My problem with how that money now is being considered to be spent is that they're putting it through advisory committees trying to decide how to chop it up. I think that there's enough experts right now to be able to open up real centers in all the communities to start helping maybe expand this 28-day business and to start to address the problems with the addicts on a personal level, and that we don't need to have all of these hearings and how we're going to spend the money. We just need to get it to where it's needed. We know how to do it.
Thank you. Mr. Tomlinson.
I kind of answered this with the first question, but like I said earlier, this is a personal issue for me. I mean, like many people probably in this room, heroin and fentanyl and opioids have impacted all of us in one way or another. I'm 35. I was kind of growing up, probably college level when this all started hitting, and kind of saw it in real time as different acquaintances and friends, like Commissioner Boucher said, started out with taking a painkiller for a sports injury, and next thing you know, they're shooting heroin. And it's hard to believe how we got there. And during this pandemic, which obviously things only got worse when people were unable to get treatment, I attended multiple, I think 3 funerals for 3 different individuals, all under the age of 20, due to opioids. But if I get down there in Annapolis, another thing I want to do is work to expand our drug prevention education in our schools, starting at the very youngest we can possibly start.
Thank you. Commissioner Wance.
I'm not sure you can legislate your way out of this. I appreciate the question, but I just don't think that you can. I think it all starts with everybody working together to combat this. And there's some great ideas here. I will tell you that I worked on legislation this past fall with MACO on getting the increase to our ambulances that go out and take care of a patient, and that was battling the insurance companies. So if you want to legislate something, maybe you ought to start with them, because, you know, the 28 days, that's on them. The insurance companies are powerful, and they've got a powerful lobby that'll push back on everything that you do when it relates to the length of time. You can see that in your hospital stays now. You're in and you're out. So again, if you're going to do something legislatively, that might be a good place to start, but I think it all goes with working together on this, and I love the idea of getting to our kids at a very young age for education.
Thank you. And Dr. Willens.
This is a multifaceted answer. It doesn't just have one solution. There's awareness and education, rehab, certainly empathy, but it really starts in the source at locking down the border. And where this comes, where the fentanyl is coming from China. My parents lived in Green Valley for 15 years, and we saw things deteriorate very rapidly over that time. A lot of it is our demonization and marginalizing of law enforcement and Border Patrol, not Republicans, the Democrat establishment. And I don't say that with any kind of bias. My family came here legally, fleeing Eastern Europe, anti-Semitism. My kids are Latino, but we have to, that's not just who's coming across the border. There's trafficking in persons, in drugs, including fentanyl, and weapons, in international terrorists. And thanks to Chairman Joe, every state is now a border state. And these middle-of-the-night transports to Maryland have to stop, that Governor Hogan endorsed, and his endorsed successor will likely continue. As Commissioner Boucher stated, you know, one dose can cause addiction. We use fentanyl to take down wild hoof stock. So it's very potent.
Thank you. We'll start this time with Commissioner Frazier. We've heard some support for the Second Amendment tonight, certainly, and Carroll County, I think, is behind the Second Amendment in general. We also see mass shootings on the news way too often. What types of changes, if any, would you like to see made in Maryland gun laws?
Well, first I would say, I believe everyone has a right to have a handgun for personal protection and a rifle for sports shooting or hunting. I think that's what you have a right for. Now, I think personally that in order to buy a gun, you should wait till you're 21. I know people are going to say, oh, people in the military get them under 18. They do, but they're under very close supervision. We don't have that close supervision if you just go to a gun store and buy it. I also believe the background checks have to be as thorough as they can possibly be. If it takes 4 or 5 days to get a background check then that's what it takes. And you can't just do it for a background check in Maryland. If you just did a background check on me in Maryland, it's not the only place I lived. Check other places as well. So thorough background checks. And my time's almost up, so I can just stop.
Thank you. Mr. Jendrick.
The Second Amendment has nothing to do with hunting. It has to do with an out-of-control government. We're not there right now, but a wonderful case study is look at Venezuela. They were supposed to be the next greatest democracy coming up in South America. They sit on the largest oil reservoir in this side of the hemisphere, or this side of the earth. They had a horrible shooting where a lot of children, I believe, were killed, and they passed gun laws that you can't own guns, and everybody said, yeah, this is going to be great. And about less than a decade later, they went socialist. And everybody is equal in socialism. Everybody is equally poor, except for the people who rule the country. So very, very in favor of the Second Amendment. It needs to stay intact, just as it is. Shall not be infringed. Doesn't have any room for interpretation.
Thank you. Delegate Rose?
I agree. Shall not be infringed. There's a reason that that was put into our Constitution. And our right to bear arms is sacred. We should have been a shall issue state all along. The way we've been handling it is wrong. I'm very happy with the recent decision by the Supreme Court, and my hope is that Maryland will be brought into line to adhere to that. I think that you could pass 1 billion laws. It is not going to keep a gun out of the hand of someone that wants to do harm with it. When you take it away from law-abiding citizens, you make law-abiding citizens and their families less safe. I don't know what else I can say about that.
Congratulations on your endorsement by the NRA.
Thank you. Mrs. Taylor?
Yeah. I unequivocally support the Second Amendment as well. We live in a free society, and unfortunately there are bad actors and there's evil. I think that the school resource officers in our county are just a wonderful thing to stem any type of problems that we might have in our county. I know that when I drove by my girls' high school and I saw that sheriff's car out front, I was always very reassured. We can't stop evil by taking the rights away of law-abiding citizens and abusing the Constitution.
Thank you. Mr. Tomlinson?
Maryland already has some of the toughest, strictest anti-Second Amendment laws in the country, really, and every session, it just gets worse and worse. The Democrats pass more and more bills to make it tougher for law-abiding citizens to get guns. So I certainly don't think we need to make the laws any more strict in Maryland. I think that the Democrats down there probably need a better understanding of exactly what gun ownership is about, or legal gun ownership is about. One of the things that I did earlier this year, I organized a Second Amendment night where I had it was an event I organized where I had a bunch of really good guest speakers, including president of our local Sportsmen's Association and the president of Maryland Shall Issue come talk, and they provided a great education to us. And I was thinking, unfortunately, everybody in that room was probably already for the Second Amendment. I wish some Democrats had been in there. But the real problem here, and it was touched upon already, is mental health issues. That's what we need to work on, not making our gun laws any more strict.
Thank you. Commissioner Wentz?
I'm also a strong advocate of the Second Amendment. I've been through the concealed carry process and know exactly how difficult and challenging it can be. With that being said, however, I think we're all just stunned and shocked by the tragedies that we see. It seems like weekly here lately. So I'd really like to see a push for more gun safety and put the emphasis on that. Once you have it, you know, there should be more safety procedures, and maybe that's part of the legislation that could occur to put more safety procedures in place. But certainly the mental health issue is a big problem too. And you're right, Delegate Rose is right. You can throw as many bills as you want at this, and it's not going to stop insanity. But I think gun safety and focusing on that may help.
Thank you. And Dr. Willens?
Safety, mental health issues, but even folks with mental health issues for a screening, it shouldn't take 7 days unless we're living in the Pony Express era and it takes that long to get that information. I swore an oath to protect and defend the Constitution of the United States 20 years ago, and I uphold that oath to this day. I'm the only one who's carried a firearm with a commensurate training and experience into combat, and I'm not willing to trade any of those liberties that we fought for. Gun grabs historically have spelled bad news, particularly in Nazi Europe, for Jews and others who had their right to bear arms taken away from them that was not enshrined in a constitution for them. And taking away those guns, as we've seen, only leads to knives, box cutters, underwear and shoe bombs, vehicles driven and plowed into people, and pressure cookers at the Boston Marathon. Doesn't change anything. My daughter's first day of high school at Perry Hall, there was a school shooting. So I know the anxiety, and I also thankfully know the relief that parents go through with those school shootings. And my first inclination was to go get my first firearm at that time in 2012.
Thank you. And Commissioner Boucher?
All of our rights as a nation are derived from the fact that the citizens are armed. It is one thing that makes us quite unique from the rest of the world, and that's why the rest of the world is jealous of us. The issue with the gun violence goes back to criminals not being properly charged and convicted of the crimes they commit. And that's intentionally being done by the Democratic Party because they do not want the rural conservative Republicans to be armed. They want to have more control over the populace. It's absurd that time and time again you see reputitious criminals committing crimes with a handgun, that there's no way they legally obtained it, or having the charges dropped, and there's a motive for that. It's important that we prosecute criminals and keep them behind bars, and the mass shootings that are taking place are a direct manifestation of the mental health issues that we are inflicted with by our COVID policies. And we must address the mental health of people out there and catch them before these things happen. And so often you hear, oh, I knew there was signs, so I did nothing about it. I think we all need to be vigilant.
Thank you. At this time, we'll start with Mr. Jendrick. What would you do to address the funding necessary for infrastructure in Carroll County?
Well, we have a $7 billion or $7.5 billion surplus. I think that, besides funding first responders fully and completely, I think if we had a infrastructure plan, actually I think we do have an infrastructure plan for 32 south of 26 to expand it, I think the state needs to just start funding those shovel-ready projects that we always heard about but never materialized.
Thank you. Delegate Rose?
Thank you. I will say I've criticized Governor Hogan for many things, but I will say one thing that he did get right is finally under his governorship, instead of sinking all of our money into mass transit projects, finally for the first time throughout the entire state, to include Carroll County, we got money for our roads and our bridges and things that we needed. So that's one thing that I think is extremely important, and that's one thing to keep in mind as we go down this road of having a new governor. And that's something, those are questions I think you should ask. It's been mentioned, you know, we've talked about highway user revenues for a long time. The governor has been able to get more and more of that to come back to our municipalities. They also work on infrastructure. As a delegation, we have worked together with the county and with a lot of our municipalities to make sure, and in fact, this last year, we were able to bring back money for a lot of projects that cover the entire county area. In addition to 32, we also need money to help the congestion on 97, which I know is now one of our new priorities. Thank you.
Thank you. Mrs. Taylor?
Here I go back on spending. Right now, we have a projected budget of about $58 billion in 2023. In 2013, it was around $35 billion. We need to look at core government functions: police, education, water, roads, and I would add broadband. And we need to say no to the things that we simply can't afford.
Thank you. Mr. Tomlinson.
I think when you talk about infrastructure in Carroll County, our municipalities really need it more than anybody. Recently, I was having a conversation, or I was taking a tour out in Tawnytown with their mayor pro temp, and one of the things they pointed out, or one of the things that he pointed out, was the need for a bypass out there in Tawnytown with Baltimore Street serving as their main street. Tractor trailers just blow down there, causing traffic and other issues, and they could really use a bypass. I saw in Hampstead back in 2009 how much of a difference a bypass was able to make there, and that was thanks to Governor Ehrlich. Out in New Windsor, I know they need a lot of help with having water issues out there. With their water is extremely expensive. I was just talking to Mayor Neil Roop out there about that. So I look forward to getting down there to Annapolis and working hopefully with a Republican governor and being able to find funding for a lot of these infrastructure issues.
So local infrastructure funding has been a problem for us ever since I've been in. We've lost millions to the tune of upwards of $10 million over the last 6 years that we should have gotten here. So I do applaud the legislation and the governor for at least getting a little bit of that back, and that's admirable. But we need a lot more. It takes an army to get a project done. I've been working on a project up at 140 in Mayberry, where Runnymede School is, to get a right turn lane in there, and it took 4 years to do that. So even if the money's there has to be a better process of being able to get that money to the counties and the municipalities, because we all need help. There's no question about it.
Thank you. Dr. Willis?
Some of this is a top-down issue as well. We received a couple $2 billion in COVID relief money that's not only unspent but unappropriated that can go to infrastructure, as well as a national infrastructure bill that's been passed that we're really not seeing. And the problem with a lot of the bills at the national and the state level is that there's so many earmarks and pork in it that oftentimes it won't even get passed because it's so morally repugnant to the other party and it's not focused on what it's supposed to do. We all know the infrastructure bill was about 11% infrastructure at the federal level. And also, so many times infrastructure is not matched with development. The development runs rampant first without being in balance. And often it's an afterthought where it winds up in referenda, which are a great tool for the electorate. But unfortunately, who doesn't want to vote against things like infrastructure and schools and police and things like that? But you also have to look at it like, do you authorize us at the county level or state level to borrow X tens of millions or hundreds of millions from the Bank of China against your children's future? And the answer I often have to say is no. I feel like I'm emboldening them for fiscal irresponsibility in the future.
Thank you. Commissioner Boucher.
Well, I believe that committee assignment and legislative skill are extremely critical in this position. You have to get on a good budgetary Ways and Means Committee and fight to bring the bacon back to Carroll County. And as a legislator, you have to have a lot of good skill and influence in people on the committees and behind the scenes, because that seems to be the way most politics work, to get the money back to our jurisdiction. You have to fight to bring the bacon back. And unfortunately, unless we're down there fighting, we'll get shortchanged when the money's divided up amongst the counties. So having the skill to fight on committee and get money back to us is critical for financing it.
Thank you. And Commissioner Frazier.
Well, first, since I've been commissioner and well before that as well, we put a transportation letter out to the state of Maryland which lists our priorities on highways, county roads, all that kind of stuff, what we need to have done and what we'd like to see to have done. The state then looks at that and determines what they can do for us. And they have been helpful, and they have been helpful in the past, but we need more. We need people down in Annapolis to fight for our transportation letter so we get some more money back here for that. Highway user revenues have also been mentioned. I believe while we did get more money this year, it's still, I think, about $10 million below what we used to get. And that's on a yearly basis. Think about that. We had that highway user revenue was first, the state said, we'll take care of that for you as a pass-through and give you that money. It's not the way it's working. They're taking care of it for us and keeping the money, most of it anyway. And one thing I want to mention really quickly, you have to maintain all the infrastructure. We have to look at that as well, but my time is up.
Thank you. And we're running short of time, so this will be the last question this evening. And we'll start with Delegate Rose. As a delegate, how will you ensure Carroll County's voice is heard over the next 4 years?
Well, we have work to do that. I have worked to do that in my entire time in office. As you know, Maryland is a very lopsided state as far as our representation, and so we consistently stand up and speak up for local control. We try to make people understand in Annapolis that while you might have an idea that's good for Montgomery County or Baltimore City or Prince George's County, we think we do things pretty well up here. We think that we should have that autonomy. To be honest with you, it's very difficult, but we will continue to stand up. I think we come up with very good amendment strategies. We get them on the record. We make our case. We speak up for our business community. We speak up for the citizens of Carroll County, for our school, and for local autonomy, and I will continue to do that.
Thank you. Mrs. Taylor.
I think bringing Carroll County values to Annapolis is exactly what Maryland needs. In order to do that, I think that we need to perhaps use the committee system and how hearings are conducted in order to get more information from each of the agencies to make sure that money's being spent properly. I also believe that people across the state all want the same things too. And there's a lot of, I think there's a lot of camaraderie that can be established with maybe the backbench Democrats. We sometimes are held captive to the leaders, but I think there's a lot of things that are common, and we can come to a lot of common good. And find our one Maryland. We used to talk about 3 Marylands, I think, in a while, but to come with that one Maryland.
Thank you. Mr. Tomlinson.
I think a lot of times people think that there's no hope for Republicans, which we all are up here, down in Annapolis, but that's not necessarily true. I've spent a lot of time down in Annapolis, whether it was for work or shadowing with our current delegation and really even previous members or old members of the delegation, and there are wins that can be had. I mean, just this past session we saw where I believe it was Delegate Terry Hill was trying to had a bill to remove any mention of God from the Maryland's Constitution, and the Republicans were able to work together and get out their message, and were able to get that bill defeated. I remember being down there a couple years ago and seeing Senator Reedy work masterfully to end a sanctuary state bill. So if we're smart about it and we work together, Republicans can accomplish a lot, and I think that that can carry on.
Thank you. Commissioner Wance.
So over my last 8 years with the Maryland Association of Counties, I've sat beside many leaders in the state, from Baltimore County to Howard County to Garrett County and all points in between. My goal in Annapolis would be reaching across the aisle and making sure that everyone is heard and that we work together for the best interest of all of us across the state. Regardless of what letter you've got beside your name, I do believe that in our hearts as Marylanders, we all want the same thing. We want safety, we want good education, and we want the best place to be able to live, work, and play. And I believe that that is working across the aisle. I have never used the word I will go down and fight. I believe we go down there and work together.
Thank you. Dr. Willens.
I've had 20 years of leadership experience through the military, but leadership isn't really the domain of the legislature. It's the executive branch. The legislature's responsibility is to represent and to maintain the public trust. People don't want to hear my opinion. They want to hear their opinion coming out of my mouth, and that's done through debate, not through fighting. Not everything is a fight, nor should everything be a reach across the aisle scenario either. But when the word fight is mentioned directly or in some synonymous form in almost every sentence, it kind of smacks of a scorched earth policy. I would like to advocate for the areas of subject matter expertise that I have in science and in business and agriculture and children, but no one can do a job on day one. What I have been able to do is switch jobs every 2 to 4 years and ramp up very quickly and have a thought process that enables me to tackle novel scenarios, and as we learned from COVID, expect the unexpected.
Thank you. Commissioner Boucher.
I believe it's important for Republicans to work in mass because we are such a minority in the General Assembly, and by massing together and having a common caucus theme and a unified message, we would be more of a force in the General Assembly. God willing, we make gains as Republicans in the General Assembly, we become veto-proof. That gives us more leverage at the table of legislation. So it's important for Republicans to make more gains in the General Assembly, and with those gains, we'd have more force, because this is a political game, and the more numbers we have, the more force we will have. Thank you.
Thank you. Commissioner Frazier.
Well, I think you can start by sending a moderate Republican down to Annapolis. If all you're going to do is go down there and say, no, can't do this, can't do that, we're against this, nothing's going to happen. You have to work with the Democrats down in Annapolis. It's a necessity. There's no way around it. Having more Republicans down there would be great, but it's not going to happen right away. And I'm just saying, I think that's a great idea, but it's not happening right away. I also believe that we agree, Republicans, Democrats, on most issues. On most things. There are some things we don't agree on, but we agree on a lot of things. So we could go, I would go to the sponsors of these bills and say, this is a really good point, but this over here, maybe we could work on changing that a little bit so it'd be more palatable for the people I represent in Carroll County. And one other thing, put more enabling legislation in. Enabling legislation means the county can sign on to it if it will benefit them, and if it doesn't, it doesn't. Thank you.
Thank you. And Mr. Jendrick.
In my professional career, what I do is I find and fix the errors for vaccine production. We drill down through the error and find out what happened, what can we do to make it not happen again, and why what happened doesn't affect the quality of the product. I would apply that to the legislation that I have to review and vote on. I would dissect it, take it apart, find that nugget that's going to either be a bonus to Carroll County or a negative to Carroll County. And then, like Frazier said, work with the sponsors of those bills to try and change that negative nugget to a positive nugget for Carroll County. I believe that was the gist of the question. That's how I would apply it. And that's.
Thank you. Well, that concludes the Q&A for tonight. I think it's been an interesting and enlightening session. And again, we appreciate the fact that we were able to get all 8 of you here today. Thanks very much for coming. And now, each candidate may present a 2-minute closing statement. This time, we'll start with Mrs. Taylor.
Thank you for this opportunity to hear more about my concerns and priorities. I just want you to know where I'm coming from. I oppose tax and fee increases. I support funding public safety. I will demand a more robust audit system of each of our agencies. You will know how your money is being spent. I will oppose any effort to institute vaccine passports or to mandate that our school children take experimental vaccines. I will support parental rights and oppose woke policies such as CRT, which do not enhance education. And I will seek to curb the out-of-control State Board of Education's powers over our locally elected board. We need to curb our out-of-control spending limits and which is becoming more burdensome. Your money should be spent on your priorities. But most of all, I want you to know I will do all in my power to protect your constitutionally protected freedoms. I'm grateful to have endorsements from the Maryland Farm Bureau, Maryland Right to Life, and my former bosses, Congressman Roscoe Bartlett and Dan Cox, and from some of the people who know me best, our local Republican clubs. And I hope that I can earn your vote. Please visit my website, sallybtaylorfordelegate.org, all spelled out. And thank you and have a great evening.
Thank you. Mr. Tomlinson.
Thank you for allowing me to be here tonight and discuss these important issues. After this election's over, 3 of us on the stage will represent Legislative District 5 in the General Assembly, not just as individuals, but as a team. And anybody who has spent a significant amount of time down in Annapolis, they know that there's no single delegate can accomplish anything on their own. In order to pass a bill or secure funding in the governor's budget, a legislator has to be able to work with his or her colleagues and understand how state government works. I've worked alongside the members of our current delegation for the last decade, including Senator Justin Reedy, Delegate Susan Krebs, Delegate Rose, and Delegate Haven Shoemaker. And that is why they have all endorsed me, because they know that I can hit the ground running on day one, and that I'm a fighter who will stand up for my constituents in Annapolis and deliver results. Through my working contracts, both in the private and public sector, and in state procurement, I have a deep understanding of how government spends our money and what types of reform and oversight are needed. Once elected to the Maryland General Assembly, I will fight back against tax increases, vaccine mandates, government overreach, the opioid epidemic, and liberal indoctrination in our schools. As your delegate, I will fight for small businesses, our agricultural heritage, the integrity of our elections, the lives of the unborn, law and order and those in uniform, and Second Amendment rights. Most of the folks up here tonight are retired or approaching retirement, and I hope to be there one day myself if there's anything left from Social Security by then. But at this time, I'm 35. Like I said, I just got married less than 2 weeks ago, and God willing, we hope to have children very soon. And I'm not going anywhere. I will be in Carroll County for a long time. I will be here calling Carroll County home for the next 20, 30, 40 years. So I'm invested in seeing that Carroll County stays the way it is and that we have good folks representing us down in Annapolis. So I please ask that you consider voting for me, Chris Tomlinson, on July 19th.
Thank you. Commissioner Wance.
So thank you to everyone that put this together. This was a good event, and I hope everyone got some good information out of it. As a lifelong resident of Carroll, I've spent most of my life volunteering and being heavily involved in the community. And I've spent countless hours serving various organizations, community activities, which has kept me in touch with the real needs of the citizens of Carroll. And it's been an honor to serve and making a difference for all of you as a commissioner since 2014. I rely heavily on experts and citizens in decision-making, and I've never had a personal agenda. I think it's very important to make sure that when you are elected into one of these positions, that you represent everyone with no personal agenda. When I first walked into a volunteer firehouse here in Carroll back in 1976, and it was in June, a week ago, the one thing I wanted to do, and the one thing that's in my blood, is to help people. And that's why when I retired from Baltimore County in 2012, I decided to run for office, to help people. And that's what I want to continue to do. Regardless of who you're for, the important thing is to make sure that you all go out and vote and pass that on to your friends and family, because your voice needs to be heard, and this is a very important election. So I ask for your support. I've got gas left in the tank. I can do a lot in Annapolis for all of you. Visit my website, stevewance.org. You will find that I have not aligned myself with anyone. I'm running on my own merits. I have been endorsed by several organizations, but it has been my honor to serve, and I hope I can continue to do that. And again, thank you for being here, and thank you for tuning in.
Thank you. Dr. Willens.
We heard from 8 candidates for delegate this evening, and the question is who stands out among us as best qualified to speak on your behalf on the issues that are critical to you, or rather, which 3 of us? Carroll County is a breadbasket of Maryland, and feeding Maryland is a daunting and impressive task. Yet elitists in Annapolis often consider us a flyover county. First, dairy producers were hit hard by the price crashes and dumping of milk in 2020 due to the pandemic, and now inflation, fuel prices, and supply chain issues coupled with existing oppressive regulations have added insult to injury, not just to agricultural producers, but to consumers as well. I am the sole candidate with any agricultural background. I've owned a business for the past 6 years, and I appreciate the obstacles that many of you have suffered, particularly here in Maryland, and this far predates the pandemic. Not all of the candidates have business experience in the private sector. This is also the county where I've chosen to make my retirement stand with Deborah. Concerning the threat to our community and our children from the opioid epidemic and the secondary consequences of the pandemic, I have the direct biomedical background to deal with these issues. And I will also promote the confirmation of constitutionally aligned state justices who respect separation of powers. When you receive messaging from my worthy opponents, ask yourself who is best qualified to express your thoughts, ideas, goals, and struggles in real time and obtain sensible and preferred solutions for you. I signed a national pledge to adhere to and advocate for term limits. At present, I've received more than half a dozen endorsements from organizations as diverse as the Plumbers and Steam Fitters Local 486, Informed Choice Maryland, Stand for Health Freedom, several Republican clubs within the county, and Dan Cox for governor. More important than any of those endorsements, I respectfully ask for your vote for Scott Willens on or before July 19th. I would be honored to be your voice in Annapolis, and I would also ask that you extend your selection to include Sally B. Taylor. Thank you.
Thank you. Commissioner Boucher.
Thank goodness for air conditioning. It just kicked on. It's pretty hot up here in the spotlight. I want to thank the Media Center for putting this on, and also all the individuals out here in the audience taking time every evening to come here. That means you're thoroughly committed and concerned about the future of our county. Anyone that knows me understands I have a very deep, long-seated passion in political science. I absolutely love it. I carry with me a copy of the United States Constitution and Declaration of Independence. And on the bottom it says, read it, know it, share it. And that's some tremendous advice for people, especially anyone that wants to get involved in politics. This is the laws in which we live under, the supreme law of the land. I believe that divine providence and the United States Constitution needs to be the bedrock of everyone's public service, and it's mine. Before every session as county commissioner, I pray for strength, wisdom, and guidance, and it was delivered to me throughout this pandemic. I was the one member of the commissioner board that understood what was going on in the violation of your rights. I have no endorsements from any elected officials, nor any endorsements from any special interest groups. And some people in politics think that's a disadvantage. I say it's a tremendous advantage to me because if elected, I'm beholden to only one group, and that's the people. And the people rule this nation, and I'll be beholden to you. You have 3 picks here this evening. I want you to think about who best resembles your culture and your values that you're going to send to Annapolis. And also, which 3 members on this board do you think will work best together to accomplish your goals and feel that they're doing the best thing for their community? And I'm hoping that I am one of your 3 picks. Thank you very much, and God bless America.
Thank you. Commissioner Frazier.
Thanks. First, I'd like to thank the Community Media Center for hosting this forum, the people for attending, and for the people watching at home. I believe my work background and my public service has prepared me extensively for this next step in my career as your state delegate. Carroll County needs someone who can go down to Annapolis and reach across the aisle and get things done for Carroll County. Too often after a session in Annapolis is over, we hear how terrible things went down there. It's almost as if our delegation didn't know that we're the minority party. Because of that, we must work with the Democrats to bring back results. If you can't reach across the aisle, then don't go down. Just saying no is not enough and has resulted in minimum results for Carroll County. To get things done, I will work with bill sponsors no matter what party they are from, because that is what it will take to be effective. I am a moderate Republican, and a moderate Republican is what is needed now in Annapolis to help close the divide and make progress for all the citizens of Maryland. I thank you, and I ask you for your vote for Dennis Frazier for District 5 delegate. Remember, early voting is July 7th to the 14th, and Election Day is the 19th. Remember, the primary is the election for delegate. The top 3 people in the primary will be your representatives down in Annapolis. Think about that, and please, please go out and vote. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Jendrick.
Thank you to the Community Media Center for putting this on. This has been fantastic, I think. I'm pro-small business, obviously, being a small businessman. Small businesses are the lifeblood of our community. I'm pro-safety and security. I think we need to fully fund all of our first responders. I'm pro-local control of our school boards and parental involvement in the school board. And I am also pro-Second Amendment. Like I said earlier, shall not infringe. There's no room for interpretation. I've been endorsed by Susan Krebs, Ed Rothstein, the Maryland Farm Bureau, and I'm rated AQ by the NRA, which means I answered a questionnaire correctly. I would advise everyone to look at everybody's website up here, their Facebook, their Instagram, their Twitter, if they have one. I don't have one. My website is jendrickfordelegate.com. Pick two that you think would represent you the best, and then vote Jendrick for your third. Thank you very much.
Thank you. And Delegate Rose, you'll have the last word tonight.
Okay, well, thank you. And thank you again to the Community Media Center for this opportunity this evening. It has been an honor to serve Carroll County since 2015. This is a great place to call home and a wonderful place to raise a family. And I will continue to fight, and I'll use the word fight because I'm not afraid of a word, to keep it that way. I will stand up for our farming community, our businesses, our Second Amendment rights, the unborn, and law enforcement. I will always side with the rights of parents in education policy. My conservative principles are a reflection of my respect for the people and their rights as guaranteed by the United States Constitution. My record is clear, my record is consistent, and my record is conservative. And I ask for your vote on July 19th. Thank you very much.
Wow, this has been really an informative evening, and I'd like to take this opportunity on behalf of CMC to thank all of the candidates for joining us this evening and providing such honest and candid information to the citizens of Carroll County. We also want to thank our live audience for participating with us this evening. They're out there, and they are also listening. I'd also like to thank those of you that are watching at home and participating on watching through your own personal devices. And we particularly want to thank those of you who submitted such cogent questions for these panelists to answer and respond to. Tonight's forum will be rebroadcast on cable channels 19 and 1086 beginning Wednesday, June the 29th, and is available on demand at carrollmediacenter.org. Before we go, though, I'd like to encourage everyone to learn more about these candidates running in this 2022 primary election season. To learn more about these candidates, I would also suggest that listeners and viewers tune into the Carroll County CMC's voter guide on CMC's website. Voting is not just a right. It is a responsibility, and every vote counts. So please take the time to learn all about these candidates and be sure to vote, whether by mail, through early voting, or even coming out to the polls on Election Day, July 19th. And with that said, thank you and good night.
Thank you, Charles. We're relieved of duty.
I'm done.